They're not the droids that you were looking for, Michael.
I spend all this time preparing. I really do prepare a lot with you because your business is it's just interesting.
Thank you.
And
I know you love enterprise software.
it's sexy. Yeah. But you are in the middle of your first $1 billion quarter. Is that right? So that's sexy.
It's very exciting.
So talk about that.
Well, you saw Salesforce.com just had a really incredible quarter, more than 30% growth in not just the top line, but in deferred. Great numbers on cash flow, and to see a company that is going to do more than $4 billion this year in revenue, still growing at more than 30%, is something in our industry that we haven't seen in a long time. And it's an exciting moment, and it's really made possible by the huge changes that are going on that have been, I think, really well articulated at this conference. The shifts in cloud, the shifts in social, the shifts in mobile are providing these waves of incredible disruption through the enterprise software industry, and it's awesome, and it's a great time.
But also it's because you acquired somebody, right? Isn't most of the revenue from an acquisition?
No. Most of our growth is core, and
It's from the destruction of competitors.
I hope so.
Is this whole thing, like when you're this partnership with Oracle and your buddy with Ellison, like that's half the bit is talking about that. Is that you really are, like you don't call them a loser anymore and nothing? You didn't make fun of the...
Well, I did see the races this weekend, however.
Yeah. Okay, so there's still, you don't really like get along with them at all.
No, I do. He's my mentor. I work for him. He was our first investor. He was our first board member, and he's a great friend of mine. And there's no one in business that I've learned more from than Larry Ellison. He's a phenomenal executive, and our industry owes him a tremendous debt of gratitude for showing us so many lessons on how to build great companies.
There are some quotes about him from the past where you've said things slightly different. So.
No, that's not true.
Oh, okay.
It's not.
Okay. So those were all lies. If you talked about how you used Oracle when you started Salesforce, but if it were today you were starting Salesforce, you wouldn't use Oracle, right? It's ancient.
Well, it's a complicated decision when you're building a enterprise service that needs to achieve tremendous scale, tremendous reliability, availability. Salesforce does more than 1 billion transactions a day, and when you're looking at these numbers, you have to look at and say, okay, how are you going to do that? And we found, and we continue to find, very excellent vendors, Oracle and others, who have provided us the tools to build a fantastic service. Different entrepreneurs will make different decisions. I think of the 25 companies that we've acquired, none of them use Oracle. So that's very interesting. So there's different ways to build these services.
So, but if you were starting Salesforce from scratch today, would you use Oracle or not?
We may. I really think the product is outstanding. I really do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Talk to me about. We are going to get more entertaining.
I'm waiting.
I'm good stup, but I want to get some of this stuff, like the new file storage stuff. So
we could talk about you because I know you like that.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. So we won't talk about the file storage stuff.
I can talk about file storage. That's an exciting topic.
Because you gave up on that battle, right? So you're not competing in that space anymore.
No. We have a very fast-growing effort called Chatterbox that we announced actually a year ago here at the show. And you know that we have built into our service this tremendous social platform called Chatter. And both of those things have phenomenal growth. We bought a company in Paris where we've actually found a number of really phenomenal companies to buy called Entropysoft, and we've connected that into Chatterbox, and it gave us the ability to connect into all these heterogeneous file stores as well as maintain our own homogeneous capability, and we renamed the product Salesforce Files. It's really getting set up for what I would say is a major relaunch of our platform and our core applications at our Dreamforce conference, which is coming up in November. And you know that conference will have more than 120,000 people here in San Francisco. And
it's always lovely traffic and getting a hotel.
I apologize for the traffic in advance, but we will have a phenomenal show, not just for us and the relaunch of our core platform and applications, but also we will have hundreds and hundreds of fabulous new enterprise companies who are displaying their technology to our customers, and it's become a great show. I think it's now the largest vendor-led show in the industry.
I mean, it's a monster.
It's a phenomenon.
And I always appreciate, by the way, that you come to Disrupt beforehand, either weeks or a month beforehand, and give a little teaser on what to expect there. So,
well, I appreciate being invited.
I really, really like you as a person. And,
I like you. I always have.
So, you were complaining.
Most lawyers I don't really like even. So, I mean, it's really a double compliment.
And we're going to get to the NSA stuff later. So,
right.
You were complaining about Apple just a few minutes ago backstage, and I actually thought it was really interesting what you're saying, and hopefully you'll repeat it, because I think it'd be good for Apple executives to hear what you just said.
Okay, what did I say?
You said that it's like they're trying to pretend Steve Jobs never existed.
Well, my comment only is, I have a couple comments, but I would say that number one, the only thing that I have offered advice on is that when I go to Apple events, I used to work at Apple. I have a long history with the company, and Steve Jobs is a huge mentor to me. There would be no Salesforce.com without Steve Jobs. Many of the things that we have created in our company, he was the inspiration for and guided us to. And we owe Steve Jobs a huge debt of gratitude in our company and our entire industry. And I think that it's appropriate for Apple to acknowledge that on a regular basis. And when I was at a launch, I didn't like that there was not an acknowledgement, and there really is not any acknowledgement of Steve ongoing. And I think it's okay to say thank you, and we're very grateful for everything that he has brought to us. Look at the audience and how many people are using Apple products.
Yep.
Steve Jobs had many messages for all of us, but I think that the most important message, I'll tell you a story if we have a minute. There was a memorial service for Steve, and I was fortunate to be invited to it, and it was at Stanford, and I realized it was going to be special because Steve was very mindful and conscious about everything that he did, and I knew that he had planned this, and everything from the program and who was going to be speaking, and to who the caterer was, and it was a phenomenal program. And I was there, and we heard Larry Ellison spoke, and his family spoke, and Bono and the Edge played, Yo-Yo Ma played, and then there was this reception afterwards, and then we were all leaving, and on the way out, they handed us a small brown box.
Okay.
And I received the box, and I said, this is going to be good. Because I knew that this was a decision that he made, that everyone was going to get this. So whatever this was the last thing he wanted us to all think about.
Okay.
So I waited until I got to my car, and I opened the box. And what is the box? What is in this brown box? And it was a copy of Yogananda's book. Do you know who Yogananda is? So Yogananda was a Hindu guru who had this kind of book on self-realization.
Okay.
And that was the message. The message was actualize yourself.
Yeah.
That was Yogananda's message.
Okay.
And if you look back at the history of Steve, that early trip that he went to India to go to the ashram of his Maharishi, and he had this incredible realization that it was his intuition was his greatest gift, and that he needed to look at the world from the inside out.
Yeah.
And here, his last message to us was, here is, Yogananda's book. And I spoke to someone who was responsible for acquiring all the books, and they're like, yeah, it was a hard time even finding all the books. We had a hard time finding the books and getting them and wrapping them up. And I just thought of that, and I look at Steve as a very spiritual person, especially as he relates to our industry, that he, in many ways, was, the guru. And that's how I used him. In my work at Salesforce, when I had a really hard problem, I would call him, or I would go down to Apple and I would say, what should I do? And that's how I saw him. So when I look at that, I look at it with extreme gratitude and a level of generosity back. And I remember his thought that we need to all be working on actualizing our self.
Yeah.
And that book, which is called Autobiography of a Yogi, if you haven't read it, and if you want to understand Steve Jobs, it's a good idea to dip into that, because I think that it gives a tremendous insight into who he was, but also why he was successful, which is he was not afraid to take that, key journey. And that is for entrepreneurs and for people who want to be successful in our industry, a message that we need to embrace and to vest ourselves in.
But are you literally saying that people should do LSD? I mean, like he did? How did you smoke? Did you ever do LSD with Steve Jobs? Did you ever smoke pot with him? I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? When you're talking about self-actualization?
No, well, yes. Okay, that's a good question. So, it's funny because last week I had dinner with Ram Dass. Do you know who that is? He conducted the LSD experiments with Timothy Leary at Harvard in the 60s and was a big contributor to that movement. So it's ironic that you kind of bring that up. For somebody like me, I will just tell you my own story in that, I was I started programming when I was a young teenager and had my own software company when I was 14, 15 years old, and wrote arcade games. And then I got involved in Apple, and I worked in the Macintosh division, and I wrote the first native assembly language on the Macintosh. And I did that while I went to college. I finished my college degree at USC, and then I went to work for Oracle. And being successful when I was young, I found a need to kind of straighten myself out a little bit. And I know that a lot of people turn to drugs for those kinds of things. And
why did you do that?
What's that?
Why did you say a lot of people turn to drugs for those kinds of things?
Did I point to you when I said that?
No,
I'm not implying anything.
I don't think it was more than implying. I think.
But I would tell you.
For example. But anyway, back to you and your.
And what about me? And what do you think about me?
Yeah.
And how do you? Yeah. And for me, I am not my path is not through psychedelics or through LSD. I've never done LSD or any psychedelics or any recreational drugs. Actually, it's just not my path. And but meditation is a major part of my life. It's been that way for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And that is something very much that I align with Steve on. And I'll tell you that when I had this great meeting with Steve where I was really in trouble, actually. I had dinner with Steve in 2001 after it was part of a program that he had put on for philanthropy that he was building with his wife called College Track. And we had this dinner in Palo Alto, and he had just launched the iPod, and they had forgotten to make the reservation for dinner. And he said, "Hey, Mark, I want to show you this." And he took out of his back pocket the iPod, and he's spinning around. "What do you think of this? And what do you think of that?" And I go, "Oh, this is really cool." And and then I said to him, well, you know, you could run pretty cool apps there, and you could also do some video. And he goes, that's ridiculous. We'll never do that. And he said it, and he smiled at the same time because he never really told you what he was going to do. That was part of the magic. And I said, you know, I'm having some struggles in Salesforce, and I want to come down and see you. And he said, come down. And I was very gracious. And so, honestly, it took me a while to get up the nerve to call him back and actually do it because it was intense. And I did it though. I called him, I went down there, I brought my two co-founders with me, and we sat there and I rolled out my whole corporate strategy, the product, where we were in our development. And I said, now, you know, what do you think we should do, Steve? And he said, there's 3 things you have to do. And I said, okay, well, what are they? He goes, number 1, and he kind of looks away and he looks back and he says, well, you better be 10 times larger in 24 months or it's over. And I went, yeah, that's scary. I said, okay. He goes, number 2, you need to build and get a huge client on your service like Avon, and the CEO of Avon was on this board, and that was very important. I said, all right. And he goes, number 3, you need to build an application economy. And I said, what's an application economy, Steve? And he goes, I don't know, but you better go figure it out. And I went, oh shit, I need to go figure and I left, thinking about it, and it's like a Zen koan. It's like you go to Kyoto and you meet with a Zen monk and they give you this koan to kind of figure out what's going on in your own mind.
Twice last month I did that.
So,
can you explain that a little bit? What is a koan?
A koan is kind of a riddle, and that's kind of how I looked at this. And so, for a couple of years, I was thinking about this, 2002, 2003, and then I had this idea that what he's saying to me is somehow Salesforce needs to not just be an application, but a platform, and we need to be able to have a directory or marketplace of applications, be able to save applications from our platform into that marketplace, make that marketplace public, and bring those applications back into our platform. So I said a great name for this would be App Store. So I registered appstore.com. I got the trademark on App Store. I designed the whole thing. And in 2005, we rolled it out and we called it App Exchange. And so he calls me in 2008 and he says, oh, you need to come down for an announcement that I'm having. I said, okay. And so we're coming down there, drive down, get to the audience, it's in their proprietary conference room. And he's on stage and he says, I'm so excited because I'm here to announce the most important thing Apple has ever done, App Store. And I'm sitting with 5 of my employees, and literally they all go, because it was like this grace. It was this very spiritual moment where somehow they're like, how did all that just happen? Because it was something that we had talked about internally for years. But here was his revelation on it. And at the end of it, I walked down and I said, I'm going to give you a gift. And he said, what gift are you going to give me? And I said, well, we had so many great meetings and discussions. I'm going to give you appstore.com and the App Store trademark. You're going to need it if you're going to have a product called App Store. And he goes, oh, well, we're never going to make very much money on that App Store thing, smiling. And I said, I know, Steve, but you should have this anyway. And, that's the kind of coincidence, serendipity, connectivity that I always saw with him. That was his magic. He had the ability to see the future, to bring it forward, to inspire it in others, and his message of look inside yourself, realize yourself, look to the kind of path, the autobiography of Yogi, which is not a story of LSD, but a story of self-realization. I think that is so powerful. And when we get to Apple today, the most important thing for Apple is to realize themselves. That is, when they get up on stage, they still kind of want to look like Steve and act like Steve. And even, I looked at some of the old announcements they did recently, and before they do a video, they always have a slide that says video on it. And I love that because it's something he always did. He would always say, and now I'm going to show you a video, and the word video would go on the screen, and then the video would play. But I think for them, they need to find themselves and be who they are. And I think that in many ways they're still trying to be him, and instead they're great guys actually. I have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for Tim Cook, for Phil Schiller, for the whole team. I think they're a phenomenal team, a team that any company in this room would be thrilled to have any one of them.
Yeah.
They just need to be who they are truly, and respect the past, but as Steve would say, project the future. And it has to come from them, and I think that's the only path forward for Apple.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I mean, I've never just let someone tell a story like that without interrupting. I mean, that was amazing.
Well, you should try it more often.
That was great. I mean, I always like Steve Jobs stories, but there's some stuff in there I certainly had never heard before.
He was great. He was, Dan Farber sitting right here. We were in Bamley 4, okay? And Dan Farber, I was like, it's 1984. It was like June of 1984, July of 1984, and I'm trying to figure out how to make the assembly language work on the Macintosh, and it was a holy nightmare getting it to run. And there was like motorcycles in the lobbies and grand pianos, and everyone was drinking fruit juice. And there were shiatsu masseurs giving all the developers back massages. And Steve Jobs was kind of running through the hallways and like patting people on the back and motivating them. And
yelling.
It was magical. And there was like this pirate flag on our roof. And I'm like 19 years old going, this rocks.
Yeah.
Okay, and it impacted me. And when I always thought, oh wow, this is like one of the great things. And then it was always hard for me to be able to just have a normal conversation with Steve, because I put him in such a pedestal because he was such an incredible person. And I think everyone here agrees with that, and has had this huge impact on our industry that continues. But that impact can continue, even though he's gone, if we continue to listen to what were his big messages and his big ideas about the kind of things we can do to have a great industry. And I think that some of the problems with some of the books that have come out and movies is this: they do not honor the spiritual aspect of his personality, and that really bugs me. And I watch that, and I watch, and I love Ashton Kutcher, and I love Walter Isaacson, but those products do not tell the real story of who he was as a true prophet and visionary and spirit of innovation, and just to reflect some of the aspects of his personality that can be sensationalized, I feel were inappropriate. Not that should be overlooked, but that other parts must be included, and because they were not, that is not right. Because that sends the wrong message to all these entrepreneurs that you should just go and be an asshole and you can be successful. No, that's not his message.
But it's worked for you.
Yes, it has, actually. It's worked for me, and I feel good about it, actually.
You talked about, it's actually a moving story, and I want to actually just go back and watch it again.
But do you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm communicating. I've never really thought about this, but I haven't really communicated it like this. But I feel like we need to get back to, if you want to understand what has driven so many great
Steve
stories.
Jobs is a genius artist, is what you're talking about, and that's very hard though for someone to capture.
Who really was building and developing and enhancing his spirit.
Yeah, through drugs sometimes, but yeah.
Well, there's different paths, and I honor different paths.
I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's an interesting article I read recently that is talking about how maybe Bill Gates should have done more drugs, right? And then it turned out that apparently he did actually do some drugs, and it was a really interesting article. That's why I brought it.
I don't think there's anybody who's alive today in our industry that I respect more than Bill Gates right now. What he's done for the world has to be, we have to be just blown. He saved 10 million lives.
Yeah.
leaving behind his company 10 years ago
Yeah.
and focusing on his foundation
Yeah.
because he knew he had some insights that he could save lives and not just a few lives, but millions of lives.
Yeah.
And it is something that we have got to look at and go, why do we not have more examples from our industry of people like Bill Gates?
Yeah.
Yes, he did his job in the industry, and
Yeah.
you can judge that as you will in terms of how he did it. But since he left the industry and became a full-time philanthropist with the Bill, and his wife is phenomenal with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the work they are doing is unbelievable. And I just saw him at a conference. I have never seen a happier person. He has the biggest smile on his face and has the most joy.
Because
And it
Ballmer is leaving, or
I think because of, well, I can get to that, because of what he's done for the world, which I think when we start
Did he
companies
do
and we
much?
create value,
let me
that's
ask this. You've
gotta be a
always
huge
given
part of it. Okay.
Your philosophy
And
is
that's the end of that story. Forget the storytelling idea, actually. And we'll move on.
This is a clarifying question that actually is.
All right.
You've always given a lot. Well, I mean, the sort of way 1% all the way through. But did he give much before he retired, or did he sort of save it all up? And
No,
yeah,
he didn't. He really, and not only that, he didn't create a culture of philanthropy, which I think is the greatest opportunity as an entrepreneur. The ability to give back
yeah,
is built right into every company in this room.
yeah.
And your employees want to
1%
do it.
of your profits,
1% of your equity,
Yeah.
1% of your profits,
Yeah.
and 1% of your employees' time. Is it so much to ask?
Yeah.
And do you know the change that you can? Do you know that we have done more than 500,000 hours of community service through Salesforce.com? We have run more than almost 20,000 or more than 20,000 nonprofits and NGOs for free. We've given away we've given away tens of millions of dollars, soon to be hundreds of millions of dollars. I've given away more than $100 million. And the ability to give back is a jewel
Yeah.
that is in every one of these companies that we start, that all it now needs to be done is be polished. And that will sparkle and make your company so much better that you're not just in it to make a bunch of dough. And there's nothing wrong with making a bunch of dough, but make a bunch of dough and give back. It really is awesome.
You know, one thing that was hard for startups. If a startup right now said, "Hey, oh yeah, I'm just starting," it's easy when you're just starting to give 1% of your equity. But how do they do it? Like, it's actually pretty complicated trying to figure out through the lawyers.
It is not complicated. We have a website called sharethemodel.org. We have inspired lots of companies.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And we have helped them get set up. And it's not complicated at all. It's easy, and I think it's an imperative. I've written about it. I've written books on it. I help do coaching. We have more than 100 full-time employees in our foundation, and a lot of them will go out and help you to create your own foundation. If you're starting a company, why not create a foundation on day one? It doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
The equity doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
The time doesn't cost you anything because you have no employees.
Yeah.
And the profits don't cost you anything. You have no profits.
Not even
But
close,
if
yeah.
you are so fortunate to actually hit the
Jackpot.
the jackpot.
Yeah.
And you're in the casino and the gold coins start to come out of the machine. It turns out 1% of them will automatically go off to help other people, and that's pretty darn cool.
Who should be the next CEO of Microsoft?
Gates.
Whoa, 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 whoa. He's happier, he's done all this thing. You want him to stop helping the world because, well, that's important. It's not as important as him running Microsoft?
I think the only way to save Microsoft right now, because it is such a disaster, is he knew it needed to come back, not forever, but for a specified period of time, let's say 36 months, because he needs to push the reset button on two things.
Yeah.
He needs to push the reset button on his mantras that he installed in the company, like Windows everywhere and all this.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of mantras, which are these processes that still run in the company that are not doing the company any good. And number two, he needs to push the reset button on people. Not just get rid of Ballmer, but he's got a lot of people in that company that he needs to either hit the reset button on. And there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, they can go and get great jobs and do things in lots of other companies. But he's got to reset the company. And he's the only one, I think, who can really do it.
What was worse for the
I mean,
company?
I could be proved wrong, but I think he could do it. And he would have to take a break from saving the world. But his wife is so fabulous and doing such a great job, she can continue with that for 36 months or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
He can jump in there for 36 months. And then part of this 36 months is hit the reset button on the mantras, hit the reset button on the people, and hire the new CEO. Those are the three things he needs to do.
Do you believe this will happen?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just telling you what I would do if I was...
Did you tell him this when you saw him last week?
I told Dan Farber, and he wrote it up, so it's all awesome. All my work is done.
What happens to Microsoft if he doesn't come back? Do you think that they'll be around in 10 years?
Sure, of course. Microsoft will be around in 10 years, but what role? 10 years ago they had command and control over our industry, and today they are just, a very large company who likes to throw its, weight around and try to be disruptive.
Yeah.
And hurt others, which
so
is
we're
not good.
We're way over time. So I'm not going to get to talk to you about some of the things I want to talk about. Honestly, that the Steve Jobs stuff was just, it's really great.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. Thank you. I've been kind of looking for a place to talk about it, and for whatever reason, it wasn't on my mind that we were going to talk.
No, we didn't talk to you, but
it's. But I think that it is the seminal message for every entrepreneur. You want to be a great entrepreneur. You want to build a great company. You want to build great products. You want to change the industry. You want to be the next Steve Jobs. Then listen to his message.
Yeah.
Realize yourself.
Yeah.
Develop yourself. Go inside and then find that greatness, and then be mindful and project the future, which is something he would always say to me. He said, be mindful and then project the future. And that's what he did, and you can do it too, and every single person in this room can do it, and it's one of the great messages of Steve Jobs, and we should take heed and be grateful to him who gave us that lesson, and not just gave us the Macintosh and the iPod and the iPhone and the Apple II and whatever, but who gave us that idea that, we can do it too.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.